Hello, here I am. My name is Dorothy Rose, and I'm a goldsmith in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And today I'm really excited to tell you about how cultured pearls first started out. And really, this is the story of the incredible chutzpah of one entrepreneur who was just super duper determined to make this work. So, in order to talk about this, and in fact, I should say this one entrepreneur was Kokicho now I'm drawing a blank. Unbelievable. Mikimoto. And so I want to, in order to really talk about this, I really need to lay the ground for you because it's such an incredible story. So if you put yourself at, some of you may know this, I practice contemplative Japanese archery, and I have, participated in traditional Japanese tea ceremony and so on. So I'm very, tuned with this. I like this, and I've of course been a Buddhist for 30 years. So I'm very attuned to this kind of whole culture and find it fascinating. And so I know that Japan was closed for a long time. The long story short, in 1636, 39, depending on how you're counting, prior to this, basically the different daimyos were ruling different areas of Japan. Daimyos being kind of the lords of that area. And really, the emperor was only there as a kind of a figure. But the daimyos were ruling the different areas of Japan and fighting each other all the time. And there was always war between the different regions and a lot of war within Japan. And in the end, one of them, Tokugawa, kind of came out on top and was able to, in the end, unify all of Japan under his rule. And this began the Edo period of Japan. And so now we're at 1636, 1639 in Japan, where Tokugawa decides to close the borders. And this is known as the seclusion. Ooh, wrong word. It's the seclusion, and it was incredibly impactful. They kicked out all the missionaries. They were getting like funny vibes there, and they kicked out all the foreigners and just closed the border completely. They still had some trade with some Asian countries, but they closed the borders to the Western world completely. And that then resulted in a period, the Edo period in Japan, that had tremendous flourishing of the arts. Many Japanese art forms that Japan is known for today originated during this period. And there was one religion, which was the Shinto Buddhist religion, very peaceful. Everybody was united. This was an incredibly peaceful and prosperous time for Japan, where they were secluded for these 250 years and really only were with themselves. There were very few Westerners on the outskirts there a little bit, but basically they were secluded. And if, by the way, you are a lover of literature, there's an incredible, very short book called Silk. It's written by Alessandro Barrico. It's a very beautiful book about some people snuck in there to get silk out, but it was very, very forbidden. Sidetrack, sorry. So during that period, it was very prosperous, but at the same time, there was a very strong caste system. There were the samurai at the top, and then the merchants, and then 80% of the population were just worker bees, just working there, and the peasants. And yes, so I'm trying to do this quickly. So what happened is that the Americans showed up looking mainly for whale oil, which was kind of firing everything. And this was in 1867, I believe, somewhere around then. The Americans showed up, and they showed up meanwhile, like while Japan was secluded. Meanwhile, in Europe, where you had a bunch of revolutions, you had a bunch of wars, you had industrialization starting up, and Japan knew nothing about this. And the Americans decided to come on over for the whales because they needed whale oil to fire things up. This is pre-electricity. Well, it's kind of, anyways, they were coming for the whale oil and also the whale bones to put into the women's corsets. And they basically showed up in an incredibly intimidating way with big black steam vessels that of course, Japanese would have no idea what these things are, these fiery machines making big black smoke, and were very intimidated. And long story short, Japan was the ruling class, which were these daimyos, were basically forced to sign agreements that would open trade. And the Americans buggered off, came back 6 months later, but in those 6 months, Tokugawa and his people, they actually discussed together what to do about this. And what ended up happening is the Meiji period pursued this, which I'm not a historian, but I know that everything changed in Japan. Everything was modernized. The class system was destroyed. The samurai their hair was cut, and they were stripped of their weapons. By the way, one of the results of this was that people who were formerly making swords were looking for a place to put the work with their steel, and one guy named Mitsubishi found a way. So a lot of things came out of this. And during this period, we have Kokicho Mikimoto, who is the son of a peasant, noodle maker, farmer, incredibly poor, and lives by the seashore, where he sees the ama, the traditional female pearl divers, going to dive for pearls. And pearls at this time in Japan were only naturally occurring pearls in the ocean by chance, teeny tiny chance that an oyster actually has a pearl. And so it was he was watching these, and the pearls at that time, because so many oysters were being harvested, became lesser and lesser in quality. And Mikimoto had a super entrepreneurial spirit, and he wanted to be an inventor. And so he went and kept looking at this and tried to figure it out. I'm trying to make this very short for you. Mikimoto, because of the destruction of the classes during that time, he had married the son of a samurai. So the two of them, he decided that, the noodle making and, slinging vegetables in the markets wasn't going to be sufficient. And he really had this passion for innovation. And so he set out to try to figure out how to culture pearls, how to make pearls that are good. And in order to do so, I have to make this very short. The way a pearl would have grown in nature is that there would be a irritation in a mollusk, in an oyster, an irritation of something, and the pearl would basically build with nacre, build a building around it to make it not harm its being. And this is how natural pearls came about. They were always very, misshapen and not the most beautiful. And Mikimoto set out to figure out how to make the perfect pearl and how to cultivate this. And by the way, other people tried this earlier and were unsuccessful. But what Mikimoto figured out is that if he took a tiny little bit of the mother of pearl from one oyster and put it inside a pearl, I don't want to get too graphic here, but he puts it in there, then it would grow a pearl. If you would put it just anywhere in the pearl, it would grow, but it would only ever grow on the on the shell. So basically creating blister pearls, what we know today as blister pearls. So they would be like round at the top but flat at the bottom because they're attached to the oyster shell. And nobody could figure out, or he could not figure out how to make them round. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because what happened and what I find so incredible about Mikimoto is that he really wanted to do this. So he set out and basically started the very first ever oyster farm in the ocean, and set out these lots and lots and lots of these oysters. And then one morning he gets up and he looks out, and the sea is red. This is what's called a red tide. There's red behind me. And the red tide means it's algae, an overgrowth of a certain kind of algae, killed all his oysters. So he was devastated. All his investment of time and money was gone, and he was going to give up. And his wife, Uma, I think her name is, she went out and opened oysters and opened them, and she ended up finding a few amongst these that still worked, that actually a few of them survived in a little cove, protected cove. And so it was his wife who encouraged him to keep going, because she went out looking when he was almost going to give up. So then he started over, and this time he tried something different. And I'll tell you later what that is. But long story short, he did the same thing this time, putting 85,000 oysters out there, like tons, so many oysters. And would you believe it? The same thing happened. A red tide killed all of them. So a normal person would have given up at that point. But this guy, being an entrepreneur, and I can relate to this because I'm an entrepreneur, he went out to the beach and sat down and opened all the oysters. He just kept opening oysters, and lo and behold, out of these 85,000, he found 5 perfectly round oysters. Meaning he had figured out how to cultivate a round oyster, and now he was going to do it. With these, he could find investors, and he really did it from that point onward. And I just find that so incredible, that story. So these, by the way, are Akoya oysters that he was using. They're in salt water as opposed to freshwater. These are freshwater pearls that I use mostly. This is also a freshwater pearl. Look at this ring. Isn't that fun? I had to wear it today. But yeah. So I use freshwater oysters, but these are saltwater oysters. And so they're literally in salt water as opposed to like lakes. And the way he figured out how to do this, the way a saltwater oyster, well, any oyster is grown, is he would take a tiny, round, polished bead made from oyster shell. And this is the ticket that he figured out that nobody else prior to him had figured out. He would also take a little bit of muscle tissue from another oyster, and this is a donor oyster, so this oyster dies. He would find the most beautiful pearl-producing oyster and take some of that mantle tissue from that oyster and cut it into tiny little 2x2 mil pieces and put that next to the little bead, the mother of pearl bead, seed bead that he would then implant in the sexual organ of the oyster. That is where a round pearl grows. And he figured this out, and then proceeded to not only just go about and do this, but he chose the similar to how you would cultivate the best racehorses by looking at, how's their performance, how well do they produce offspring, what's their, strength and longevity and health and all those things. And he would pick the very best, Mikimoto would pick the very best Akoya oysters from the sea that his divers would find, and then further work with those and just perfect these pearls more and more and more. And so it's this striving for perfection that I find so admirable and I can relate to. And it's what got him where he is. And not only that, his entrepreneurial spirit also helped in getting him then to like how did he get to fame? He patented his discoveries. When two other people came up with other ways of how to make mabe oysters, or blister oysters, I should say, to be precise, he bought their patents. And then in 1927, he got to tour the United States and met Thomas Edison, who, because they were both inventors, they were like very like-minded people. And Edison was just like blown away by this. He said, "This is not supposed to be possible. You made it possible. This is incredible." And that gave him kind of that was his then he took off from there. Mikimoto did. And he just continued to perfect things, and it's just an incredible story. This brand is today known for the best oysters. Of course, other people in other places also started doing this, but I was just really inspired by Mikimoto's story, and I found it interesting. He died at the ripe old age of 96. And to the end of his days, he was a frugal man. He's known to have said 3 bowls of rice for breakfast, 2 bowls of rice for lunch, 1 bowl of rice for dinner. And you know what, that in sleeping belly is important, which I can also relate to. So I was really inspired by his story, and I wanted to share that with you, because it's so incredible. Then, of course, Freshwater Pearls, similarly done, except, I'm kind of running out of time, but the important thing to know about saltwater versus freshwater pearls, first of all, they all take years to grow. Saltwater pearls, I think between 6 and, now I'm drawing a blank, it's at least 4 years, but it's 6 to 8, I think. And a saltwater oyster, for an oyster that produces saltwater pearls, can grow 1 pearl. Whereas a freshwater, like the mollusk that's used for the freshwater pearls, will have, they're actually on either side of that mollusk, and they can implant about 25 seed pearls in either side of that shell. So freshwater mollusk will produce between 30 and 50 pearls. So obviously that's a much more affordable situation. But Mikimoto, by the way, part of his inspiration was that he wanted to adorn the neck of every woman with a strand of pearls, and he was hoping to sell them for $2 a strand, which at that time, of course, it would be something different today. But he also was quoted saying that he wanted to sell them for these $2, and if people couldn't afford that, everybody should be able to afford that, and if they couldn't, he would give them to them. So I thought that was an interesting inspiration, to wanna make pearl strands for women everywhere. So, and today, I might add, men also. So that's it for today. Next week, I have an exciting guest also about pearls. Joanie is gonna join me. She is my very trusted pearl merchant from Montreal, and she will join me here on the live to talk about various things with pearls. We might talk about care. She will maybe bring us some special ones to show that you wouldn't otherwise see. And if you do have any questions for Joanie, please let me know in the comments below so that I can ask them next week. I wish you a very nice day, and thanks so much for being here today. Take good care, and hi Irma. Bye.